Okay. So, hello all. Thanks for being here. Much appreciated. You are watching the Reverie Roundtable, which we have Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so very much for being here. Yeah, we got a fantastic group of individuals here, so I'm going to introduce them and have a great time. We'll start with my man, Fanatic. Fanatic, thank you for coming through. Thanks for being a great guest. As always, right? Always down for the fight. So how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. I'm excited. I'm playing me some TFT. I've been grinding a crap ton of League of Legends. I just went on a pretty fantastic hike over there at Griffith Observatory this weekend. It was really, really good times. I'm excited for the conversation. I think it'll be great.
You and your girlfriend?
Yeah, me, my girlfriend, one of my best friends, and his girlfriend. It was pretty good. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. I've just never done that, like just go on a hike just somewhere, you know? Like, I mean, it sounds like attractive, but like just never
It's life-changing. You don't recognize how much like we spend around the technology. Like you do, because it's just obvious, but you don't have anything to really contrast it with. And I think that contrast really highlights it. So like being out in nature, for me, I obviously have like a great deal of appreciation for just like the world that God created. And then secondly, it's like I don't have my phone going off or any of those kind of things. So I'm just in the moment, like kind of living and taking in this thing. And it's beautiful. I think it's one of the best things I've ever done.
All right. Well, I got to give it a try sometime. Right. All right.
For sure. And it's free.
Absolutely. Well, that part's important too. That part's very important. Okay. We have our friend Scott. Scott, thank you for being back here as always. Right. Scott
Absolutely.
Is one of the first people I hit up with these invites. And he continues to say yes. So thank you so much.
No, of course, it's fun. I like coming into this little battleground from time to time. So first and foremost, Fanatic, you can't appreciate the trees until you've done acid at least once and seen the fucking veins in the tree leaves. All right. Second of all, I'm just kidding. I'm glad it's good to touch some grass from time to time. So I am Scott from Fabian Liberty. We're an anarcho-capitalist duo stream. I'm kind of the face that goes out, but if you come to our channel, you'll see a lot of political news, philosophy, some reaction videos, a lot of discussion and talk, and a lot of interviews. We've been doing a lot of interviews lately. Been talking to a lot of libertarian candidates and a lot of other people. We talked to Tula Bar. We talked to a bunch of people. This Wednesday, however, which we normally don't stream on Wednesdays, but this Wednesday we'll be talking to Yaron Brook, chairman of the Ayn Rand Institute, one of the world's most famous objectivists, second maybe only to Leonard Peikoff. Should be super interesting story. I mean, he was an Israeli intelligence NCO. He was came to America to get his PhD in accounting, and now is just like the most based hardcore capitalist and philosopher there is. So definitely come check it out.
Thank you for helping me identify the enemy. All right, next we have Zonia. Zonia, our good friend. Thanks for stopping by, friend. We haven't had Zonia here in a while, right? On one of our lowest panels, so I was very happy she said yes. How are you, Zonia?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, I do the occasional appearance. I like my big breaks. I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me back on Prime. And I guess for me, I'm back to streaming more regularly again. I stream about like 1 to 2 times a week, trying to keep it a little bit moderated so I don't burn myself out. And I do a number of different types of commentary and like analysis type streams. I stream on Twitch and YouTube. Pretty easy to find. Zonia Dead at Twitch, and if you go to my About page, you'll find the rest of it there. And otherwise, I'm just glad to be on. So thanks.
Thank you so much. Right, Sprouticus is back with us. Right, Sprouticus is always a breath of sunshine. Oh, breath. Sunshine. You are always a stream of sunshine. Yeah. I guess you can't breathe sunshine. But thanks for coming through.
Not a problem. I'm always excited to be here. Sorry. I'm always excited to be here. It's great to have conversations with people that you can't typically have conversations with. So it's always good to be able to see what the other side thinks. Not only that, sometimes it makes your arguments better. So always glad to be here.
That's true. You can't typically have cogent arguments with ANCAPs. But we provide you that platform here. Let's go to Isle.
That's just because you can't keep up.
That must be it. There's no other explanation.
We have our friend Isle, who is back with us. Isle, who has terrible lighting. Isle, thank you for coming through. Stopping by.
It seems that I'll have to be your person of shadow today. Thanks for inviting me onto the panel. It's really hot over here. My laptop is literally telling me it's 86 degrees. So I'm going to be here sweating it out. But, I'm still here down for the panel. The topics were too interesting to pass up. So,
well, thanks so much, right? And what you need to do is invest in central air. I have it, and I will never go back. I will never go back.
Bro, I just found out that other people didn't have that. I didn't know that wasn't normal. I've been in California and the freaking desert, and it would just be unconscionable to not have central air. And then someone recently said that. They were like talking about it like it's a thing. It's something I've taken for granted my whole life. What the freak is wrong with people? You gotta, if you don't have central air, you just gotta get out. You gotta move somewhere else. It's crazy.
Indeed. Like, make that happen, right? It's worth the investment. It's so worth it.
It's not common in New York.
I'm on the East Coast, and we gotta specifically put it in your house. But like, I literally couldn't do this right now. Like, I could not be in my room because my room's on like the second floor, right? I couldn't be in my room right now with the amount of heat. It'd be boiling up here. I'd be like just pouring right now. Because I have central air, it allows me to do this. So yeah, there you go. Last but not least, we have our friend Doobie, who is wealthy enough to have central air, I'm sure. Doobie, how are you?
I'm doing very well.
Are you boiling?
No, I'm good.
No, of course not. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a frog, so I guess I would have noticed, but yeah, I don't think I am. Right now, I was.
Okay, all right, let's get started. Hopefully, our last
He loves the humidity.
will be here soon. All right, topic one. Topic one is not in front of me. A New York bishop and his wife were robbed of $400,000 worth of jewelry in a heist during a live stream service. While no one was hurt, this has raised questions about the ethics of Christian faith leaders who live extravagant lives. Does this preacher deserve criticism for blatant displays of wealth? Is the problem that such congregations extract so much wealth out of their communities without giving back? Are these individuals corrupting the spirit of the faith they profess? Or is it that there's no problem at all? So it's guy, and there's plenty of these preachers. I'm not sure if this guy was a Welsh preacher. What's that the name of the one I'm talking about? Yeah, Welsh.
Joel Osteen, Prosperity Gospel.
Prosperity Gospel, yes. I'm not sure if the person is necessarily a Prosperity Gospel, but he does clearly have some sort of extravagant life. And they just it's literally filmed this guy getting robbed. So they knew exactly what was going to happen there. They'd seen him on the stream. They came through in his church, waving weapons. Luckily, no one got hurt at all. But still, why is this guy just tricked out with all this jewelry? Him and his wife, and is that a bit of a betrayal? So we'll start with our friend Fanatic.
So I think it's really crazy that we want to immediately start labeling all that way, right? But I would say that the individuals, here it does seem like for you to have that kind of wealth, we obviously recognize that so much of many Christian people are living in poverty and are subscribing to these ideas from places of hope and things like that. I think it's gross. I think it's gross to have that much wealth, and just period. I think, considering what your faith is and how much it talks about being pious and all of that stuff. But I don't know the inner workings of this church. I don't know how much charity that they do. We know that the vast majority of charitable giving, as evidenced by the debate that I had with Doobie, in which I smacked him, the vast majority of charitable giving is done by Christians. The vast majority of shelters and freaking food banks and all those things are Christian. So maybe his church is doing quite well in that regard and like helping quite a few people. And if that's the case, then maybe this is only a drop in the bucket compared to how much he gives and so on and so forth. But I doubt it. I doubt that it's enough for that. So that's that.
Thank you so much. Scott, please.
Yeah, I tend to be in agreement with Fanatic here. Obviously, I don't think having an absurd amount of wealth is a problem in and of itself. But the question is, how did you gain that wealth? And when you're dealing with religion and you're dealing with this idea that you can kind of like, it's very difficult. This is a difficult one for me in my principles, because how do we define fraud, right? It's very clear that if you go to the extremes, that there's some element of fraud occurring, right? Where there are promises being made to people based off of religious beliefs that the individual knows are not true. But how do you prosecute someone by challenging beliefs that they profess? You know what I mean? Like, so it's a very difficult thing to figure out how we would like legally deal with this situation. But I do think it's important to notice, this is a little bit of the anti-religion coming out of me. One of my favorite biblical quotes doesn't come from the Apocrypha or, King James or anything like that. It comes from the Gospel of Thomas. And I think it's pretty obvious why the Catholic Church, once it, consolidated with the Nicaea Creed, didn't adopt the Gospel of Thomas. Obviously, there's some mysticism there that they didn't like, and Jesus being a mischievous child. But I think one of the biggest reasons is this quote. You've heard this quote plenty of times, which is, the kingdom of heaven is within you and all around you. Well, that's not the full quote. The full quote is in the Gospel of Thomas. The kingdom of heaven is within you and all around you, not in buildings of wood and stone. Split a piece of wood and you will find me, lift a rock or lift a stone and I am there. This idea that like there's supposed to be this massive church organization and that Christianity is not supposed to be people congregating together to worship this ideology, or this religion, but instead to worship this giant mega church and give it all of this money. And then like so much of that money being taken off of the top. At one end of the spectrum, it's obviously a scam. It's obviously fraud, but like, how do you litigate that? And how do you figure that out? I don't know that I'm necessarily up to that question just yet, philosophically or legally. I don't know. So I'm interested to see what other people have to say.
Thank you so much. Sonia, please.
Yeah, so the church in particular has a lot to do with community and community supporting community. And a lot of churches get a lot of donations from their community with the idea that it goes back to the community in some form or another to help them. It's hard to determine exactly what those contributions end up going to in the end, especially if you end up, if you're throwing just money in there, that money can go in any number of different directions to support the church and such. There are the Creflo dollars of that world, though, the people who are oftentimes explicitly going into the realm of religious leadership in order to make themselves wealthy, or corrupted by it by tapping into what they're being given little by little over time. This is something I experienced when I was 12 years old, going to a church. Is back in 1990. The leader of that church that we went to actually lived in $1 million home on a couple of acres of land that was actually donated to the church by the family who previously lived in it, thinking that money was going to go, that the money for the property was going to go back out into the community in some form or another. But instead, that church leader moved his family into it. And they lived a very wealthy life, driving very nice cars. So this is not an uncommon thing. I think, though, it's how widespread it is, I don't know. Obviously, we're going to hear about the really corrupt people, the Creflo dollars and such, right? And we're going to focus on them. But I think it's important to criticize that and to keep a spotlight on it and focus on those situations and encourage these churches to do the right thing and have the whole community helping community thing, where people are going there and giving to the church and are better assured that what they give goes back out to the community to help people and doesn't get primarily pocketed by those at the top.
Thank you so much, Spartacus.
I think it's just inherently wrong for the essentially pastor to be to be displaying that much wealth. A $400,000 jewelry heist, $400,000 in jewelry is something that like not even like the upper middle class can afford. The upper middle class cannot afford $400,000 in jewelry. And with that being said, then he's living far above his means. And so Jesus has talked about the rich multitudes of times in the Bible. For example, he said, for wherever your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Discussing as to why it's so hard for wealthy people to get to heaven. He also said, sell all that you own, distribute the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. So it's clear that Jesus was not wanting to like push like the wealthy, like to basically to praise the wealthy and say like, oh, you've made a lot of money, congratulations. Not to say that he's not okay with you earning a nice income and being able to like live off that income comfortably, but if you're making far and above whatever you need to live comfortably, then at that point in time, I think it becomes wrong to try and just store up that much wealth, especially in something like jewelry.
Thank you so much. Okay, Kyle.
Okay. When I first got the message today and I read the headline saying Bishop robbed at gunpoint, I thought it was a Catholic bishop. It was a really big concern to me because I am Catholic. But if you would permit me to be a little bit schismatic, I'd say I read the thing and realized this was a Protestant bishop. And so, people are wondering like, oh, like shouldn't he be poor? Well, then again, I mean, he doesn't he doesn't have like all these he doesn't have all these you know obligations to like holy orders to be like a monk somewhere making cheese on a mountain. He's also, he's like doing his own life as well. And I did my research for this topic, and once you when you go to his church's page, and then you write and you click on the link to meet our pastor, it talks about him and he gives him a good um, what's it called, a biography about him. And I'll read like a excerpt from it. It says, among these great accomplishments, Bishop Whitehead is most grateful for. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. No, Bishop Whitehead is a well-rounded individual who has also excelled in the business world, from owning his own mortgage firm and real estate firm to being a well-respected advisor to very prominent men and women in various political positions. Over the years, Bishop Whitehead has developed very valuable relationships with judges, congressmen and women, senators, and other lawmakers who now seek out his advice, as well as his endorsement during their election processes. It also goes down to say how he was a special mentor to Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, how back when he was Borough President of Brooklyn, my borough of Brooklyn, because I also live in Brooklyn. Now he is the mayor. So, he was always like a really wealthy individual, but, he had his calling from God, and so he became a minister, then a pastor, now a bishop, as he rolls up the ranks. And so I think there's a difference between his personal money and then there's the money given to him by his parishioners. And I think that if he's using his parishioners' money, that would be bad and that's fraud, and I would agree with you. But if he's using his personal money that he makes from his actual trade, in his secular job, then I think that that's how he makes his living and that's how he puts his food on the table. And so if he wants to use his excess income from his secular job to buy jewelry for him and his wife and his family and make sure they're doing well, I think that's totally within his prerogative and there's nothing wrong with that. But I also think that, the people in his, that he's taking care of as, as a bishop should be able to check him and say like, okay, you're not make sure that they're not using their funds to fund his personal lifestyle, because that would be wrong. But other than that, I don't think there's a problem of him being wealthy.
Thank you so much. And we're going to expand on what you said later on. But thank you so much for that. Okay. Next, we'll go to my man, Doobie. Doobie, please.
So I think it's funny that Fanatic would bring up the sad fact that the vast majority of charitable giving is done by Christians, because we're talking about a situation in which it seems like $400,000 of that charitable giving ended up as like some chain on this dude's neck. Right, another $350,000 of the charitable giving is in his fucking Rolls Royce outside. Right, so I mean, if that's something you'd like to brag about, sure. But that being said, it seems strange to have like a specific issue with people deciding to give him money, or him taking that money. They see the change as clearly as we do. They give him money anyway. I think if it's okay for his son to like make enough to buy a $3 million house, like LARPing as some kind of fucking communist on Twitch, then it's okay for this dude to make good living taking money from people who like listening to him talk about Sky Daddy. Right? If people are willing to pay him to do this shit, go for it. I don't really see any issue with him doing this. Given that I'm not a Christian, I'm not going to really appeal to scripture for why he shouldn't be doing this. I don't think it's my business to say that he should be like chaste. What's the word? Not chaste. He should live like a poor life, like fucking Catholic priests do, other than like the ones in the fucking Vatican. Yeah, it just seems like I don't really have any ground to stand on to criticize this dude if they're giving him this money willingly and he's not, robbing anybody. So it seems fine.
Austere might be the word you're looking for. Austere.
Yeah, there's like a vow of poverty that they are supposed to take, right? But how that usually works out.
like socialists, right?
Bernie Sanders
maybe there's champagne bishops, right? Champagne Christian leadership.
Maybe Bernie Sanders making over $1 million in that book of his, right? Like betrayed everything he ever stood for, right? Complete fraud. Let's go to our last member. Black American Made Bam is here. I'm very happy to have him. Thanks, Bam. Introduce yourself to the audience, and then please go into it.
Hey, yeah, super sorry I'm late. I'm Bam, Black American Made. Y'all see me on here, and I'm about to win this debate. So yeah, back to like my position on the topic is, I don't know. I feel like people need to, and this isn't related to pastors, anybody in particular. I feel like people need to stop hating. Like, it's as weird as that sounds. Like, give up that hate in your heart. Now, there just doesn't seem to be enough details in particular related to the situation, like to say for certain whether or not what this pastor is doing is is necessarily bad, because it's not about and I say this about billionaires, I say this about everyone. I don't care about how much money an individual makes. I care about do we have enough money to do the things that for whatever organization or society or whatever you want to see. I want those. Do we have enough money to fund the things that we seem necessary and we prioritize? Now, if they're being a part of a church, if it looks like they don't have any programs that's doing any levels of charity or doing any levels of missionary work or outreach, if it seems like these things are improperly funded and he's taking in these levels of funds, that would be a problem. But if they have their own goals, their own missions, whatever they have on the agenda, and it seems to be the congregation is satisfactory, is satisfied that they're meeting all of their expectations, I think the pastor taking whatever percentage, not even necessarily the entire percentage, but taking some percentage from that would end up with them having a nice house and a nice car. I don't think these things are inherently problematic, and they're probably to a degree useful for building a congregation. Not necessarily because you need to flex in front of your members, but in terms of there's powerful people in powerful places, and to be respected in certain areas, in certain walks of life, you have to some degree look the part. So again, it could be good, it could be bad, but we don't have enough information to say that for certain.
That's just categorically false.
Wait,
you have to.
I thought the statement that we don't have enough information to know for sure where his money is coming from is absolutely true, and I think it flies directly in the face of what Doobie was saying, like, oh, X amount of his charitable giving is worn on his wrist. We don't know that, because if it's true that the man has, considerable, like a freaking profitable real estate, um, a profitable real estate firm and things like that, then like we don't know what's going on with his money. Like he could be like. It could have, that money could have been the money from whatever, and he could be doing all of the right things with his charity. We have no idea.
All right,
So we don't necessarily know. This is why I think it's better to kind of focus more on like where we kind of know these problems exist. Like an example I gave earlier was Creflo Dollar, right, where he was raising funds from his congregation to get a brand new Gulfstream private jet, right? Those are kinds of the examples where we can actually draw a direct line from the donations to the expense. And I think also talking about like the bigger picture of discouraging that kind of behavior and encouraging, talking about like how it is in ways that churches and church leadership and their congregations can better ensure that most of that money goes back into the community as best as possible, right?
So there's a couple things here. First issue I've had was, and maybe you can explain it, make me feel better about it. But Isle, you said that at first I was concerned because I thought he was Catholic. Then I figured out he was a Protestant. Like, can you explain more on that? Because now it just sounds like you hate Protestants, and it only mattered if he was a Catholic.
Is that relevant to the conversation? I feel like he's just saying that I'm Catholic, so I'm glad
relevant to the ideology of the Christian conservative. So
I thought it was
fair
funny.
But
I don't know. I didn't think it was like the whole conversation.
Curious to know how much goes behind it.
I've got several different points that I need to hit. That was one point. So, I mean, can you answer that question?
Answer that question. What's the question?
So, the very beginning of your opening statement, you said, I was really worried because I thought they were a Catholic, and then I realized they were a Protestant. Can you explain further on that?
Well, as a Catholic, I would be really concerned if clergymen of my faith got attacked under my nose in my city. I think that would be really bad. But not to say that I don't care that he was a Protestant. So I'm saying fuck him now. But I'm just saying that that was a little bit of slight relief. And then I did my research, did my due diligence. I read the article. It talked about his ministry not responding so at the very end. So I decided to just copy paste into Google, and then I just clicked on the link and just read about him, and then that's how I learned about who he was and what he's about. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Okay, okay. So obviously you don't hate Protestants. That first statement made it seem like you did. Secondary, we're gonna move on. This person was wearing him and his wife were wearing $400,000 worth of jewelry. Nowhere in the Bible would it seem to conclude that you should be able to, you should push to have $400,000 worth of jewelry. And that's not including his car. That's not including anything else. He was living far and above his means. And everywhere in the Bible, it talks about not living far and above your means. It talks about it talks about not doing that.
Where did
James? I was going to say it. If you're going to stop talking.
Sorry, you're just tripping up a lot on your own words. So I thought you were
done.
No, I was just trying to say the same statement.
Okay, what's his net worth though? What's his net worth?
His net worth? What is his net worth? I'm sure you have it on your screen.
I don't. No, I don't. But you said he's living far beyond his means. Do you know how much money he has?
He is living far beyond his means. So no, what I mean by that is that he is living far and above where it is to be comfortable. Far and above where it is to be comfortable.
That's not extravagant
as a person.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Wait, I'm sorry, Sproticus. That's not what that that's not what that sentence.
Okay, I'm sorry. I made a misstatement. That's not what I meant. I meant he's living extravagantly to the extremes.
Okay. So
I'm trying to find one. Is there any Bible verse that you can point to in the entirety of tell me whichever one you have, right? Because I'm not a great theologian, but I did grad school at Liberty University. I've read the Bible a few times, right? I cannot find anything in the Bible that states that you are not allowed to be wealthy or that it is a sin to be wealthy. Now,
Yeah,
there are
that's what it
several
says.
Bible verses, 2 that you pointed out. Another one, which was originally a misinterpretation, but like it's as easy for a rich man to get into heaven as it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, which is really just a bar to keep camels out of oases, right? Several of them that seem to suggest that it's difficult for wealthy to put aside their earthly desires and actually focus on their spiritual faith, or that it can be an indication of someone that might not be a good person. But never have I seen anything in the Bible, and maybe I missed it, that specifically states that there's a certain level of wealth, and once you attain that level of wealth, you are sinning by having that wealth.
There's nowhere in the Bible that it specifically says it's a sin, but it's consistently discouraged. For example, Luke 12:33, sell your possessions and give to the needy, provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old, with the treasure in the heavens that does not fall, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. We can look at Matthew 6:24-26. No one can serve two masters. The person will hate one master and love the other, will follow one master and refuse to follow the other. You can't serve both God and worldly riches.
Yeah. I mean, but again, that's like Augustine.
It consistently discourages it.
Augustine talked about that verse when he was talking about that a man has as many masters as he has vices, and that there's a difficulty in attaining so much wealth or so much power and being able to adequately serve God, and that it's actually like a bad thing to allow yourself to be in a position where you're so easily corruptible. But again, this suggestion that you shouldn't isn't a decree from God that you can't. And
it's highly discouraged.
But even
this isn't even what we're talking. This isn't even what we're arguing about, right?
Scott laid out, it's discouraged not because it's bad, but because it'd be harder to resist, for example, like earthly pleasures or whatever the fuck, right? Yes. If you have that kind of wealth, if you have those kind of vices.
I get this isn't a biblical lesson, but I was going to say, even Job ended up losing everything in the Bible. And because he kept his faith, he was like rewarded with 10 times the bounty 10 times the riches he already had before. Like, by
he still lost his wife and kids. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I get
it's a weird story,
but that was the moral was because he never lost his faith. The riches weren't the problem. It was like just keeping your faith. Like,
no, the moral was this is what happens when divine entities bet against humanity.
I feel like $400,000 shows a love of money. I feel like $400,000 shows it obviously shows to me at least a love of money. And like 1 Timothy 6:8-12.
Can you stop there? Do
What?
you have to love money in order to have $400,000 worth? I mean,
in jewelry. If you decide to have $400,000 in jewelry, I would argue that you love money.
Okay, but it always has to
be my argumentation.
But it always has to be relative to whatever your net worth is, right? So, like, in other words, if you have
it doesn't have to be relative to what your net worth.
Okay, so you're telling me if a person is a billionaire, for them to have $400,000 worth of jewelry says that they love jewelry?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think everyone else can see why that's retarded. We're not going to go any further.
Okay, so I mean, I can make you. Okay.
That's stupid. That's not worth entertaining.
All right. Are we done? Can I talk? Yep. Okay. Awesome. I'm glad. So, what I'm arguing is that you should live your life to a point that is comfortable, but $400,000 worth of jewelry on you at one point in time is way past what's comfortable. And so when you take this into consideration, you're looking at this and you're going, okay, so this is what the Bible says. Like, the Bible highly discourages being this wealthy, and like having this much money, right? So, but you could also take that $400,000 you decided to spend on jewelry, spend $25,000 on jewelry, which would still be really good jewelry, and then give the rest to certain organizations. Start your own not-for-profit charity. Do that. But 1 Timothy 6:8-12. But if we have food and clothes, we will be satisfied with that. Those who want to become rich bring temptation to themselves and are caught in a trap. They want many foolish, harmful things that ruin and destroy people. The love of money causes all kinds of evil.
But I think that you have like I can't prove it. This is just my theory, but I feel like you just think that jewelry itself is lame. Like, I feel like it's
wear jewelry.
But I'm wondering, would you say someone like, oh, they're not a good Christian if you found out they had 10 guns?
I'll admit yourself.
If you had,
I was gonna say something.
Yeah, if you
like you.
Wait, let's do just that.
Okay, let's Spartacus
All right.
respond, and then we'll go to you next. Okay. All right.
And
Thank you.
I'd like to go next.
And then after that,
After
Sonia.
Thank
Okay,
you.
sure.
Yeah, if you own your own private collection of like an insane amount of weapons, yes, I would argue that and that point is bad. If you own more than you would ever be able to shoot then yes, I would argue that's bad.
But what's that
But
number?
we're also,
Because
but
guns
we're,
can be
we're
really
also,
expensive.
What
Oh my
what
gosh.
translation are you using?
You know
I'm just
what?
curious.
No, I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm asking because you said insane amount you could never shoot in your entire life.
Okay.
'Cause I don't think $400,000 worth of
I don't know
jewelry,
what the
depending on
monetary
pieces.
value of that. I don't know what the monetary value of that would be with guns. But $400,000 worth of jewelry at one point in time is absolutely insane. I think you can agree to that.
I think that
$400,000 of jewelry at
depending on
one
the
point in
cost
time.
of the piece, depending on the cost of the pieces, that could be like 15, 20 pieces, like a few nice watches, like really nice watches. Like I don't think that it has to be an insane amount of jewelry. It could be just
Yeah,
like a
but
quality
but
piece.
if you had $1 million worth of guns, yes, I would be against that as well. Yeah, like I don't know what you want. This is where I'm coming from. If you had like $1 million worth of guns, I'd be like, yeah, you've got too many guns. You should probably start giving to charity or create your own charity or do something better with that money.
Well, if they already did those things and they still had money to do things that they want to do with,
Then
He's not gonna
create
answer.
it.
He doesn't
The
know how to
problem-
process
What do you
it.
mean I'm not ready to
is-
answer? What do you mean I know what I'm ready to answer. Thank you very much, Fanatic.
You're welcome.
Spartacus,
I appreciate it.
What I don't.
Bam,
What I,
Bam, you already demonstrated earlier when
Oh
I was
my
asking
gosh.
him the
Oh
questions
my
about his
fucking
network. I
gosh.
know.
No
Oh my
moderation
freaking
on this,
gosh.
right?
You're right. So Bam, earlier when I was asking him this, when I was making the statements about specifically him not having like him not knowing the net worth and like asking the questions about like, okay, so even if it's a billionaire and so on and so forth, he's not like actually processing this information logically.
I am
It's just, like,
processing. Shut the fuck up. You don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
It's just a matter of him like really boiling down to like a lot is a lot. It doesn't matter if
No.
it's relative to your net income. It doesn't matter any of those things. It's just no, it's a lot. And 400,000 is too much for a billionaire. For a person of Jeff Bezos' net worth, if he has $400 million, it's far too decadent, right? Like when you hear that kind of logic, why are we going to continue sullying this panel with this? Why don't we just move on to
I
more
couldn't buy
substantive
a
work from somebody that's not
$5,000
retarded?
piece. That would
Well,
be
yeah.
insane for me. I'd like for
And this
budget.
is-
I'm just saying.
and this is like what I want to say. It feels. I think we can. I think we can certainly point to certain religious leaders who absolutely are living in extreme excess. I don't know if we can say that about this particular one because this person kind of just popped up. There's not enough news around them, not enough history of news. So when I use the example of Creflo Dollar is because he's one of the most extreme ones that we have a ton of background on, and there's a lot of news on him, right? So maybe instead of trying to focus on this one bishop, maybe talk more about the overall general issue because I feel like we're even off topic at this point, right?
Yeah,
We're not really talking about that.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying.
That we
He
should
doesn't have any logic. We got to move on.
There is logic there. We're talking about.
I completely agree that first of all, let's not focus in on this one person in particular, right? There's more. There's many more people who, and that's why I said like before, like we don't have all that much information on them. So there's many more individuals who live this sort of lifestyle, right? So let's focus in on the general concept of this, right? I'll before that, Al, did you get a chance to speak? I want to make sure. And then after that, Scott.
So yeah, I was gonna talk about what Spartacus said because this man actually does do lots in the community. I'll just read another passage from his about page. Let's see. It says he has been adopted as the member.
You really love his about page, don't you?
Well, if we're talking about him because he got robbed, I think we should know who he is.
Right?
I mean, yeah, like
don't be mad because she did her research and you didn't, Sprout.
No, it's the general philosophy is what I'm talking about.
Okay, but you said that they should be doing things in the community, and Bishop Whitehead has. He was responsible of the Brooklyn Borough President's Youth Division in New York City, representing over 100 million young people in the borough. During his tenure, he held the Stop the Violence Initiative and organized the LOTB Speaking Tour, Youth at Risk, Brooklyn Teen Summer and Gang Initiative. And he's always and he's lots of panelists at the national town hall meetings with Eric Adams, Senator Jesse Hamilton, Public Advocate Letitia James, and other councilmen, men and women. So he's like in the news quite often because he's always doing town hall meetings for stuff in the city, and things of that nature. And so you know, he in Brooklyn politics. Apparently, he's probably like really important. You know, I'm not really into the very very local stuff, but my mom is a little bit, so she probably knows a little bit more about him and Eric Adams' time as borough president than I do. But
Okay.
So he's a Protestant kingmaker.
I still don't know what
much,
this.
yeah.
I still don't know what the head to do with anything I said, but it's okay.
My issue here
well, you
is
said
that there seems to
you
be
said that he has a lot of money, and like Spartacus,
Yes.
he has a lot of money because
Yes.
he has a lot. That automatically a red flag for you saying that he's a bad guy. But I'm saying, you know, he has a mortgage firm, he has a real estate firm. He's
You ever
out
heard
in
of Rich Mullins?
the streets.
You ever heard of Rich Mullins?
No, I haven't.
Have you ever heard of Rich Mullins?
No.
So Rich Mullins was an artist. He was a contemporary Christian artist back in the day. He's passed on now. But when he made money, the money went directly to his church, and the church paid him a salary. This is something that I would argue was what people should strive for, is that all that money is going towards the church, it's going towards better things, and he was paid a salary out of that money. My argumentation is that you should live to where you are comfortable, to where money really isn't an issue with you. But when you live in extravagance, when you live and you live in prosperity and extravagance, I think that that's too much. Especially if you're going to be one of the highest ranking members of a church, that's too much. You shouldn't be living extravagance. You should be living like Jesus did.
Spartacus, though, just
at that
quickly
point,
though,
you're
like,
talking about,
what if the church simply paid him $1 million? Like they made $2 million and then they paid him $1 million.
His salary was not that high. I could look it up. His salary was not that high.
I'm just saying that that's it
was publicly available information.
At that point,
so I just want to interject here. I want to interject here.
Okay, finish this one thing and then we'll go to Scott, please.
At this point, you're just like mad that he's not a mendicant preacher or a monastic like monk somewhere.
No, I'm not even mad he's not a monk. You can have a nice house, you can have nice things, but $400,000 of jewelry on your body at one point in time is fucking ridiculous.
Scott, please.
Okay. We keep using terms like ridiculous. We keep saying that like the Bible frowns upon wealth. You know, I tried to talk about why the Bible frowns upon wealth in the verses that you're speaking about. And you kind of just dismiss that as ridiculous, even though like Christian theologians have obviously agreed with my interpretation.
Dismiss it as ridiculous. I agreed with you.
But my other issue is, you know, that this interpretation of Timothy is a contentious one within different religious faiths and theologies. And I understand you backing up your interpretation and saying that from your perspective, you know, Timothy, you know, is stating that like you shouldn't be too rich, but there are plenty of people that read Timothy 6:17 through 19 and would say, especially Timothy 6:18, that like what he is saying is that you shouldn't give up your wealth, and that you shouldn't make yourself impoverished for God, that instead you should maintain and build your wealth, and that you should be wealthy in good deeds, that you should be using that wealth as a means to influence the community, to help people, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you're taking that position, which obviously you do not agree with the theologians that would argue that. But if you are taking that position, then it's perfectly reasonable if someone is not committing fraud and they're not stealing like money from the church, and most of their wealth is actually gained through legitimate business that they're doing, and they're doing and giving a lot back to the community, that this is perfectly within lines and exactly what Timothy told us to do, which is to be rich but to be rich in the fact that we share, and be rich in the fact that we help other people. And so like a lot of these lines are subjective and interpretation is subjective. So I feel like trying to stick to this specific like crux of like this amount of money shows that he has too much money that he could be giving up and therefore wrong is more of a political philosophy you have about wealthy people and less of an actual religious interpretation.
Not even a political philosophy. You can own a business and have a very high net worth, and you can be extremely wealthy on the net worth scale. But your salary can also be extremely small. You can decide to give most of your salary to not-for-profits. You can have a very high net worth and own Twitter, but still decide to live non-extravagantly, to live as like an average person that's comfortable, that isn't like worried about money, but they're very comfortable in their living situation with how much money they're getting a year. You can obviously do that and decide to do much better things with the rest of your money, even if you have a high net worth and you own Twitter.
But
Sprout,
even
I
if
know
you,
that
but
you're not
you know, like,
engaging. Hold on, real quick. Let's
question.
just go right back. Sprout, I know that you're not engaging with the points that I made, but have you ever worn like really expensive slacks where the silk goes all the way down? Because let me tell you, dog, they're real fucking comfortable.
Okay.
So how about if
You go ahead. You go first, Sonia, please.
okay, so maybe if we look at this a little bit differently, like what if the congregation is aware of the wealth of their spiritual leaders and they don't care and they're giving anyway, which seems to be a pretty common thing. That seems to be insanely common. So I don't know specifically about this particular church and congregation, but that seems to be something that is not uncommon at all in a lot of these bigger churches, especially prosperity gospel churches, but not even just prosperity gospel churches. So do they get the pass? Is that okay just because the congregation is okay with it?
That's my opinion. Because you brought up Creflo Dollar earlier, and Creflo Dollar is actually on the lower end of like hiring pastors. Like I think Joel Osteen is worth like almost $80 million. Creflo Dollar is worth like in the 20s of millions of dollars, and it's all like kind of public information. But I think that this isn't exact numbers. I'm definitely coming off of memory, but I think he takes in somewhere around $2 million a year. But his church, as far as like other business ventures and donations, receives like over 20 million a year. Like it's not like he's taking a majority of the church's money, even though he's the face of the church. So like that's my whole thing. It's like, are we funding what needs to be funded? Like, because even the idea of like, oh, someone making $1 million a year is too much. Like they're obviously hoarding. I'm like, but what if they brought in $100 million a year and gave away 99? They would still bring in $1 million a year. You know, is that not enough? I don't know. I think that we could always draw these distinctions. I think that there's an issue with someone who's not doing anything. But if you're making an effort to live out your values and your morality, like I don't think you going home to a nice home with nice things is.
Anybody else concerned with how connected this dude is with politicians and shit? Like fucking, I'm just saying. Like I've seen some conspiracy theory documentaries before. Like anybody checking up on this guy to make sure he doesn't have like some creepy shit going on.
But I kind of see like a church is effectively the congregation, right? A church can't really exist without having its congregation, and all those people are individually chipping in one form or another, either by working or just by going there and participating or by donating. And so if they're well aware of the fact that their spiritual leaders are high rollers and they don't have any issues with it, they don't have any concerns about it. Does it even? Do our opinions on it even matter at that point? Right?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yes.
This is
why?
the distinction between the like this situation, and I know that in the Hassan House situation or Hassan Rich situation, like there is an issue if you are literally taking all of the wealth for yourself. Like in the position of like in the position of a church, which is seen as like I said, like prosperity, like the idea of giving and like doing these programs. If you were just taking 100% of the wealth for yourself, I think that is something that even if the congregation is told about it, I think you can say that religion is one of the most powerful and most influential like things in people's life, that you could say that like it even if they agree to it, it wouldn't necessarily be consensual, because like the opposite would be not doing so for some people would be considered damnation.
I mean, it has to be consensual though. They're adults. They have the ability to consent, even if it is manipulation through religion. What if they think that they're giving even to just directly that spiritual leader is the right thing to do, that God told them to do it, or that it's getting them closer to God, etc.
Yeah, I think that can be critiqued. I think that can be shamed. But
why?
I think the real question here is like,
but that's where the mother. That's true though. They do feel religiously like that's what God requires them to do.
I think the real question here is fraud being committed? And I don't mean just in this specific instance, but I think when talking about all of like the mega church situations, right? You want to know like is fraud occurring? Like, are they telling people, oh, all of this money, you know, when you give this money, it's going to help build, you know, HIV, you know, schools and job training in, you know, South America, so that these, like, you know, these people can do that. And then what's happening is they're skimming 60% off, and like 40% is being wasted, and like the money's not going to the places that they say they're going to. And one of the issues that I have, and this is like the libertarian here, is that the state has created a monopoly on who chooses to look into the finances here. And what we can see is that the IRS is woefully ignoring 501c3 churches. From 2009 to 2014, they did not investigate a single church. They never audited one church. And throughout that time, they've averaged roughly 1 to 2 churches per year, despite there being a lot of fucking churches in America, right? Like, since the Second Great Awakening, we've been one of the most Christian nations in the first world. And so, like, I think that state monopoly and on the tax structure and that system, and the way that we don't have a free market to be able to actually be able to look into these things, creates some of this distrust that we have, because we don't know where that money's
I don't know how
Okay.
you blame the church, blame the state for churches. I don't even know how you pulled that off. The churches, if
Well, you could just
anything's a
listen to my
free
argument.
I did, but I'm saying, like, I don't know. That was just like that was a stretch of like so many degrees. The church is your free market.
So
Wait, but
okay,
hold
hold
on.
on.
It's
hold
not
on.
a stretch.
First off, I don't believe
I'll
for
let go
a
Fanatic go first,
second.
and then I want to try to
not a
reframe this.
stretch.
Go ahead, Fanatic,
Yeah,
please.
I don't believe for a second that the IRS just decided to go an entire half of a decade and literally not look into a single church. I think that sounds crazy. But if
NPR reported it, 2009 to 2014. Promise. I'll give you the
that,
link.
please. I would love you for that. Thank you. I think the other thing is that
Yeah,
like
link it to all of us.
yeah, because all of us need to see this. That sounds crazy. I think that we all recognize that, like, the churches have performed such functions that make all the sense in the world why they would get the benefits that they do. Like like I said, the vast majority of charitable the vast majority of charitable organizations are religious in nature. And like when it comes to like community and things like that, churches have always like performed these functions. Like in a society, there were large portions of time where like you didn't get to go like directly to like for Black people, and like in particular, we didn't get to go like directly and get like we didn't have credit to get car loans. So you would literally get a letter from your pastor showing that you were an upstanding member in order to get like car loans and things like that. Or when you look at like the abolitionist movement, like, and or no, not the abolitionist movement, the Great Migration, when that happened, like most of those people, they would like be moving up north in places, and they didn't have a place to leave. They just wanted to get out of the South because white people were so racist there. They were literally staying at churches. Churches were the ones that were opening up their doors and facilitating them relocating so that they weren't stuck in the South getting like hooked into other nefarious nonsense. So like churches have always performed these functions. They make all the sense. Our hospitals were all churches, right? A lot of the schools were like church organizations. So like if churches have like done the job of like shoring up all the cracks that are left behind by the government, by this beautiful system that's capitalism, then it makes sense why they would get the tax-free status and why they wouldn't be looked at like and scrutinized so freaking ridiculously, because considering even to date the vast majority of like banks, food banks, shelters, charitable organizations are still like Christian, Protestant in nature. So if that's the case, like yeah, that's why they wouldn't be inspected as much. But to think that there was 5 years without sounds crazy.
I just, for the record, I put it in the chat in StreamYard from
It doesn't
the
state,
StreamYard chat.
and it doesn't state this from 2009 to 2014 that churches weren't audited by the IRS. It says that it was effectively stopped, which means there's something behind that actually did happen. That they're not discussing. Effectively means that something is happening, although it doesn't have the effect they want it to have. So with that being,
that doesn't change the fact that they didn't audit a single church for 5 years.
It does change the fact, because you can't say they didn't audit. Even that person said that they can't state it, besides to their knowledge that they did not.
The IRS has not audited a church in 5 years.
To my knowledge, read right before that.
Okay, right before that would be NPR transcripts are created on a rush deadline by an NPR contract.
Okay, where is it? Where how far down?
It's the last sentence.
The last sentence?
The last sentence of the article.
Why
You
is
can
it
just
treating our living?
Control F and see it.
Well,
said
there's
multiple-
The
actually
last sentence of the article is, and you can listen to the first part of this series, John Burnett's unprecedented look inside finances of one television ministry, Daystar Television. So where's it at? That at the last sentence.
No, there's a section in
Your
there.
inability-
Hold on. There's a section in there about a page down. It says soundbite of church bells. Burnett, of all nonprofits, churches face the least scrutiny and oversight. They don't have to pay federal or local taxes. They don't have to worry about being audited, and they don't have to report anything to anybody. It's reasonable to ask then, what happens with large TV ministries that are classified as churches? They take in tens of millions of dollars in revenue. They're as rich as large corporations, yet many of them are answerable to no one outside of the organization. So that's a section.
Also,
that I
John
found.
Burnett
So
says the agency has effectively stopped auditing churches for the past
Effectively,
5 years.
you're right. I said effectively. You're right. It says effectively, and it says
you
in
literal- like,
Marcus.
are
In
you
Marcus.
this-
Oh my gosh! This is ridiculous. As of now, and Marcus Owens says, as of now, and in fact, since 2009, the IRS has not, to the best of my knowledge, and in fact, I don't believe, can conduct an audit of a church. Which just means we're talking about one person's knowledge inside the IRS that you're talking about when they say that. You're talking about one person's knowledge.
I'm sorry. Do you need me to interview every single person from the IRS and do an
No, but
audit
you
of
made
the
the
IRS itself?
You made the affirmative.
Because you know what?
Made the affirmative.
I'd love to audit the Fed and I'd love to audit the IRS, but as of right now, I can't. The people of the IRS are saying, "Hey, we're not fucking auditing churches," and then you're going around being like, "Well, technically, maybe they did do one, but people from the IRS say that they don't know that they can and they haven't for 5 years."
You made the affirmative, and even this article that you linked does not make the affirmative.
I don't know. I feel like that's a weird.
Dog, you're trying real hard.
No, but if you're going to make the affirmative that a church was never audited in 5 years, then you're going to need to prove that a church was never audited in 5 years. Not to the best of someone's knowledge, not audited in 5 years.
People that work at the IRS, experts.
I feel like this is the best piece of information
audit.
we have right now. Like,
I literally,
you have to
I can't
prove
give you
something else.
anything else. I can't audit the IRS because the government won't fucking do it.
Also, it's
then
not
don't
like,
make an affirmative statement like
it's
that.
not. It's also
Despite
not
it being on the
extraordinary-
GOP platform forever.
It's also not an extraordinary claim, though, right? Like, I can understand what you're saying. Sprodic is saying that, like, we would need more evidence and to be sure of it, right? To be sure that this is the case. But it's also not an extraordinary claim that he's making, right? Like, we know, for instance, that this IRS got intimidated by the Scientists, Church Scientology.
Yeah, Scientology.
Yes, Scientology, and intimidated them from not investigating them, and then like gave them like tax-free status when they were going to take it away or something like that, right? So it doesn't seem like it's like that crazy of a claim. So for this moment, I'm willing to go with what he's saying so far.
Okay, I mean, it seems somewhat crazy to me, just looking at it from how many churches are in America, not a single one being audited by the IRS.
It sounds
and for 5 years.
It didn't say not a single one. It said they faced the
That's
least
what
scrutiny and
Scott
have
said.
no obligation to put.
That's
report
what
to
Scott
anyone.
said. The church was never audited in 5 years. That's what Scott said.
This point is, I guess it's fine.
This is so stupid. I'll read you the fucking quote again.
You don't have
because
to.
of a quirk in the
You
rules
already
of the
read the
IRS.
quote.
The agency has effectively stopped auditing churches for the past 5 years.
Effectively does not
Marcus
mean
O-
it stopped.
Okay.
And
Okay,
then Marcus
circle
Owens
back.
is
We're
a
looping.
private tax attorney in
I
Washington who
know.
used to lead the exempt organizations
Yeah.
section
Oh my
at the IRS
We are
as of
moving
now.
on.
And in fact, in
So
2009, the
I
IRS
think
has
it
not.
is-
We're
to the best
moving
of my
on from this
knowledge.
point.
To the best of my
In fact,
knowledge, you're
I don't
right.
believe can conduct.
We're moving.
It's the
we're-
fucking head of the exempt
You're
organizations
talking
of the
about the entire
IRS.
country.
Are
No.
moving. Hey, everyone, we're moving on from this point. Okay, we're done with this.
hold on,
right?
Prime.
So, I just because I
I
really
just
want
wanna-
to move on to this
Trying
other
so hard to get a
reframe this
W.
discussion. Zonia, I'll give you the last word on this, but I'm moving on from this.
I just this is where things kind of got interesting, like something we can all kind of sink our teeth into a little bit. But I would like to. It would be nice to get onto topic, but it's something that at least people got really dug into, right? So that made it interesting.
Well, not
Yeah,
the specifics of this. I mean, you could say like the should on there, like, and I'm kind of closer to Fanatic. I feel like the church, obviously, I don't think the church is perfect, but I feel like the IRS is already having hard times, like tracking down money as is? Do we want to put our focus on the church of all places? The church seems to be doing.
We absolutely
Uh,
should. But
I think that's a deep
the
well of
majority
wealth
of the
that we could.
donations.
but hold on. But so
Yeah.
so here's where I wanted to go with this. Okay. All right. So I haven't stated my opinion because I'm the moderator and I never do that. But I haven't stated my opinion on this, and I thought about prosperity gospel in a few ways, and like I have moved like wildly, and if you ask me like in another week, my thoughts might have changed again. Okay, so I vacillate a lot on this, but it seems like prosperity gospel and people who are prosperity light, right? People who are adjacent to that, which seems to be like this this particular preacher we're talking about in New York who got robbed, right? People who revel in capitalism but also are faith leaders. It seems like prosperity gospel is the perfect religion for America, right? I feel like in this land of capitalism and this land of greed, that this makes sense, right? Like we haven't actually really dug into it, right? Prosperity gospel, because oftentimes what they're saying is like, well, you give to the church, well then you will receive, right? You will get some sort of a great reward. We promise. You just got to give more to us, and then you will receive. Our friend Scott talked about fraud, right? But this is fraud that's you tend not to be able. Well, one, it's not that you can't prove it, right? You can show that people who get who give don't necessarily get, right? But it's not that the people even care. Some people will just keep giving, right? Like they'll have their faith, right? This is the basis of their faith. Then they'll just keep giving. And for a country that has abandoned its morals, like leaves, and by that I mean, well, maybe never had those morals. Let me rephrase that. Never had these morals, but that is so hell-bent on not protecting the weak, the meek, right? And giving all advantages to the powerful. Like, this makes sense to me, right? Like, and why not? If this is what you want to do with your money, right? Then sure. You want to give it to this man? If he says, if a preacher comes on and says, I need another private jet, right? That's important, that I can't be involved. Like, not even like I have a private jet already, but like I need another one, right? Because one time I was forced to take a commercial flight, and then individuals on that flight talked to me, and I don't know, like that person might have been infested with demons. This is the thing that happened. Right? And you decide you're going to give money to this individual, right? Because of your faith. Well, we never question people's crazy ass faith. But in the other case, why should we?
What are you talking
now?
about? Can you make your argument?
I thought I did, but maybe I wasn't clear.
Yeah, well, you made a lot of statements and around about different beliefs and things.
Sure.
Can you make your argument clear?
So okay, I'll rephrase, no problem. So then my argument is that there's nothing for this nation, right? And how we treat faith in general. It doesn't seem to me there's anything particularly wrong with prosperity gospel. That this is a this is a manifestation of capitalism in general, right? Like this is a logical manifestation as it pertains to faith. And so why should we?
I'm trying to understand that. So you believe that because capitalism exists, where it exists, I mean, in many places, right? Mm-hmm. That the Christian faith turning into a system that some abuse for fraud, prosperity gospel obviously is abused in some areas for fraud, but it is also, it seems like a return to that kind of Protestant work ethic, that old school idea of city upon a hill. Well, no, hear me out, because the theological point here in prosperity gospel is very similar, which is this idea of predestination, right? This idea that like those who do good, some will say those who do good, like God will do good in return kind of situation. But many would say that like wealth comes to those that are good or pre-order to be good. These are kind of like the chosen people, if you will. And there's this weird struggle to prove that you are one of those people, very much akin to like the northern, colonists in America. So
what are you basing that off of? Where is that like ideology even coming from? Which denominations ever state something like wealth comes to those who do good? Where's
Wait,
Well,
Did anybody else-
the prosperity gospel? I mean, like plenty of people have this idea that in order to get wealth, you need to do good deeds because God will reward you for those good deeds. And those good deeds can be giving to the church or helping other people, etc. And that, which is, economically doesn't make any goddamn sense. But I mean, it certainly makes sense from their religious view. I don't think that's controversial within prosperity gospel.
I think that's
feel
pretty
like almost
common
and
in
I guess-
back on
like I said, I don't listen to
piggyback
that
on
prosperity gospel.
but this type
for
of
only
things
$5.99 you
aren't
can be
new.
cleansed.
Yeah, but this
Like-
type of process. I'm saying
Let Al
it's
go,
not
my
new.
bad.
I mean,
Let's-
if it's built into the structure of their particular faith or their particular denomination, does it even does it even fit the definition of fraud? Because something being fraudulent means that you're being, that you're paying for something that specific that you're expecting in return, respecting like a service or something, and you're not receiving that service and you're being misled. But the entire structure of the faith is sort of based on this almost like a sense of gambling with the divine, right? The more that you give, the more likely you're going to get something back. So it's all kind of built into the structure of the faith.
The
I don't
problem
believe
is
that
you can only prove that that's fraud if you know that the pastor that preaches this doesn't believe it.
Exactly.
And that's really the issue here, is that like, how does one prove the negative, right? How do we prove that the pastor is lying and is only saying this to steal wealth from people? It becomes a really gray area legally.
And this person only gave $9,000. If they gave $10,000, then they would have gotten all those rewards, but you stopped them before they could do so. Let's go to Isle.
Yeah, and I'm saying, this type of thing isn't necessarily new because in Andrew Carnegie's article Wealth, more commonly known as the Gospel of Wealth, that was written in 1889, and he said pretty much the same things, like hard work and perseverance leads to wealth. But the way that the Gospel of Wealth and prosperity gospel are different is because Carnegie was known even at his time as a radical philanthropist, and he believed that rich people had the moral obligation to use their excess money for the benefit of society, and therefore because they were like the ones that were gifted their riches by their good works and blessed and favored by God, so they should be stewards and do things for the poor, and they should do things to make things better. That's why like Andrew Carnegie and those of his who believed in the Gospel of Wealth did do all the philanthropy. That's why we have Carnegie Hall, we have Rockefeller Center and things of that nature. We have like all sorts of
Tax breaks.
public libraries.
Oh, there's that.
because they were just radical philanthropists, and they said, you know what, we need to have things that will stand the test of time for the poor, and not that won't encourage the slothful, the drunken, or the unworthy, as he put it. So I think that with the prosperity gospel, I think it's like a bastardization of things that we have already been so deeply ingrained in our culture, and I think that's what's going on here.
So
I feel like
first
you're
of all,
leaning
that
too
was
heavy.
just like a PR campaign by those tycoons at the time, right? Because they were hated by the rest of us. Didn't want to like a French Revolution style thing. So one of the things they did was put all that. But hold on, I want to make it clear. So I think that
or it wasn't.
gospel
You'd have to prove that
is a
instead of just assuming your cap.
Are we talking over the moderator, over the host?
Yeah.
Well, he's not really a moderator, right? Like he's a moderator and
The
a
host.
participant.
The host. Yeah.
So anyway, I think prosperity gospel is absolutely like fraud. Like I feel like it's a completely disgusting practice, right? It takes advantage of individuals who are vulnerable to that. But I also think that it makes sense that it happened, or that something like that appeared here in America. And it did so in a place that simply worships capitalism. I think that it also makes sense that the attack vector for these fraudsters was religion, right? Because faith allows for that. I don't have to actually prove anything to you, right? I just keep saying this, right? Like faith already tells you not to ask for evidence. In fact, if you do, then it shows that your faith is weak, right? Like just have faith that eventually these things I'm telling you will come true. You believe in all kinds of nonsense. You believe that there was this Jewish zombie who came back to life, right? And did all these miracles, and and then there were other miracles that happened, right? But like we don't see those anymore today, right? Because now we have recording devices. But within that attack vector being religion, it just makes sense. So
it doesn't make any sense because
wait, I wanted to respond. Hold on.
It doesn't make any sense because what you're saying is, oh, well, see, this is perfect for the capitalists, right? But the fact of the matter is that with the exception of a few proto-anarchist and anarchistic societies that are of the left-wing variety, there have been hierarchical structures of power and wealth in every society for all of human fucking history. And yet what you're calling is fraud from certain religious communities and going, see, the connection is capitalism. You're not drawing that connection in any way. You're not making the argument.
No problem.
You're just saying
so
because
in religion and all those other societies, right, has at least, sorry, I shouldn't say all those others because I don't have an expansive view, right? I'll just talk about Christianity, right? Christianity has been a bulwark of the powerful, right? It has said that, like, well, these kings, right, are divine, right? God says that they should be on the throne, excuse me, right? That's exactly where they should be, and you are exactly where you should be, right? Because that worked for the monarchy at the time.
Right.
Then we had,
which proves so you had religion buffing up the monarchy, which is a completely different economic system than capitalism.
I admit that. I understand that. I'm saying that and what did I say? What did I say this entire time? Multiple times, right? It makes sense in this country because this country is specifically unique. I didn't say that it would happen in all places that have capitalism, right? It hasn't, right? But it's happened here in America, and I'm saying this makes complete and total sense that a fraud religion would take advantage of a fraud practice would take advantage of religion because religion allows for fraud all the time.
Wait,
I think that
in the country where it hasn't happened.
Hold on, let's go to Bam.
Your argument makes no sense.
Sure, whatever.
Yeah.
Bam,
Okay.
and then Fanatic can go after it.
So this is two parts to this. One question. Like, do you believe I think that you're like taking like a social stigma, like you've like stigmatized the idea of Christianity, the idea of organized religion, and I feel like it's influencing the way you're framing for things as far as people's like motives. Like, do you think that like there are really wealthy people who don't seek to do philanthropy for the idea of like I have this money and I want to do good for my society, I want to leave some mark on society?
Sorry, you're talking about the Carnegie thing,
right? And just in general, yeah.
No. Rich people can. That's absolutely the case. In fact, I've seen examples of that. I'm talking about the Carnegie case, which was brought up by our friend Isle, which like those robber barons literally were doing a PR campaign, and like an ego campaign, because obviously things that would stand the test of time would have their name on it for all time, right?
So you were being specific. That wasn't a general thing.
No,
that wasn't a
general comment
about
about rich people in general. Rich people are absolutely capable of doing great things with their money, and completely as charitable as possible, even though they're getting tax breaks, but I'll ignore that.
Okay. All right. So that was my first part. The second part is it kind of on that into that same thing, like of the like stigmatization we have with like or you may have with Christianity or organized religion. How could we, again, like I have a way of differentiating the two, but I want to know what you use to differentiate the two. Like, how can you say that, like, oh, this is fraud, this is bad, because those poor souls can't truly consent to this. They're being manipulated. But how would you feel about an OnlyFans girl taking home $5 million a year, telling men that like she's like, oh my goodness, I love you so much if you give me money? Like, would that be like a positive? Like, yes, girl boss, let's go. Pro sex work is real work.
No. That okay. So when it comes to that OnlyFans thing, right? When they are selling that fantasy and actually imply that they actually do really like this person, they don't. I'd say that's a level of fraud too. But that's whatever. I mean, that's bad too. But in terms of Christians, it's not that I think they can't consent to it. Of course, they can consent to it. Like I said previously in my statement, they're adults. They can, if this is what they want to do with their money, they want to give to this individual, then that's perfectly fine. My problem is that like they're lying in terms of like these individuals getting something back, right? Like giving to them, giving to this church, right? Giving to this pastor will return like multiples.
But they're not. But you can't prove that they're lying. That's the problem. Is that you can't prove that they're lying. I can say within my own personal experience that the second I started like being very charitable with my giving is when like my finances changed around irrevocably. I've never been broke since. And so maybe I'm just an anomaly. Maybe it was just a chance. Maybe it was luck. Who knows what the freak? But I can say that was literally my lived experience. So I tell that to people all the time, and that's not people that are going to give to me. I tell people that all the freaking time. Like, hey, I mean, find charities to give to. I genuinely believe in this philosophy that the more you give out, then the more that you receive. It doesn't have to be my church, but I just so happen I'm going to do it at my church because that's where my God tells me to do it. But I don't think that they're lying to the people. I think this is the lived reality of people who have ever actually experienced it, and it makes all the sense.
You think prosperity? So you think people who engage in prosperity gospel, and there was one, I'm trying to figure out his name because it's slipping me right now, not Joel Osteen, but the individual who literally has a fleet of private jets, right? When he says to his flock, and there's video of this, right, him talking about like why he needs a private jet, right? When he says that it's important, it's imperative, right? So that he can spread the word of God. I remember that part.
You talking about that old white demon looking dude?
Yeah.
Billy Graham?
That looks like a fucking demon.
Pat Robertson?
Yes, exactly. No, not Pat Robertson.
Or is it?
It's another
Isn't
demon.
it Koresh or something?
Is it Graham? Billy Graham?
No, it's not Billy.
I think that, let me
No,
No,
it's
it's the COVID-19 guy.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
It's
right.
Is it David
COVID-19?
Koresh?
It's not David
Why is that
Koresh.
name?
Oh, this guy's.
No, it's not him.
Yeah,
No.
David Koresh is a
The guy who talked about he wouldn't fly on passenger jet or on normal
Not Kenneth Copeland,
commercial
is it?
jets.
Yeah, Kenneth Copeland.
Kenneth Copeland.
Kenneth
That's him.
Kenneth
That's
Copeland.
the
Yeah.
COVID-19
This
guy.
dude like
Yeah.
actually looks like a huckster. Like that. Like if I was gonna draw a guy who committed fraud, I would draw that guy's fucking face. But whatever, right?
Yeah, I think prosperity gospel is bad. Like I make a distinction. See, I the idea of like give $5.99 and your sins will be forgiven. I think that's bad. I think that the idea of like, oh, okay, we're giving to the church so the church can do good deeds in the community. Like it's not saving your soul to do this, but it's a way of like, this is a good thing you can do and towards karma, just towards the helping your community and like supporting your church. Like, and I feel like the church is something that's good to be supported, but like I don't think it saved my soul to outside the ties.
Because I haven't gotten much out of Fanatic and I want to get more out of him because, you know.
Yeah. It's okay. So
why do you feel that prosperity gospel is a problematic, and then how does that gel with your previous statement talking about like more
Oh, sure.
giving? Yeah, please.
So it's that like prosperity gospel like almost has like a sole emphasis on charitable giving, and it doesn't have all of the other tenets that are like associated with Christianity as well, right? Because like I believe obviously in like, yes, like charitable giving will also like bless your finances, but I mean you also need to be living a holy life. You also need to be like actually reading the Word of God and educating yourself on what God wants out of your life and trying to live live correctly and all of those things. And there's other areas where you can give a whole bunch of money on tithing and then at the same time cheat on your wife. And it's like, well, that's you're still a bad dude. You're still awful, and you're still hurting like your community and your wife and your family and being irresponsible and all those kinds of things. So I think there's limits, and I think the problem is whenever you talk to like Joel Osteen and people like him, he won't ever engage in things where it's like, okay, like hold your flock accountable. Like, should they be living differently? Does the Bible also tell them that they need to be like changing their lifestyle, right?
No,
And he doesn't engage in
I
that.
don't believe that's the case. I don't believe you have. So my mother has a book by Joel Osteen, right? And it's about changing your life, about like living a godly life. It's about lots of things, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't put Joel Osteen in that
yeah,
categary. You know, he's super rich.
Every
He's like
message
$40
I've
million.
ever seen from him is just like specifically on like prosperity, and when they've interviewed him and asked him why he doesn't do it, and he specifically said because like, well, you know, like that's not what people want to hear, and blah 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 blah. He's given justification for why he doesn't actually include the other parts of the gospel. So I mean, maybe he might have written a book in which he's talked about changing your life, but I know that like 99% of his messages aren't that.
Really, I thought from Joel Osteen, and this is just gonna be a difference in what we've seen. I've always took Joel Osteen as the type of like the casual motivational pastor, which is like a new popular thing. Just tell you like, hey, here's something, you know, like he reads the scripture and he says like, go out in your daily life and, you know, hug somebody, love somebody, like just like general advice or like making you feel good about yourself. Which is why I made the OnlyFans comparison, like because I consider like that can be offering a service. Some people can be told like, give me something generally vaguely inspirational, and they make me feel good and go out into my life, in your day.
But that would be
PrimeCayes,
hard.
I want to look at this for just a moment because we're talking about fraud, and none of you know what fraud is.
One second. But if that individual, talking about the OnlyFans individual, right? Like, said that you were going to get something out of this, right? Beyond their words, right? Like, hey, we're gonna go out on a date. You know what I mean, right? Like, I'd really love to, but maybe if you are kind to me, if you're generous to me, then maybe we can make that happen, right? If you did that and then that never materialized and you kept baiting a person there, like that sounds like fraud. That these
what
people...
if it's
so let me explain
what if it's less
fraud
direct? What
is.
if it's just someone saying like, oh, I think
You guys
I think people are really hot who give me lots of like money, like the guys who donate a lot. I think they're really hot. Like that's not direct.
I don't think that's fraud. Like I'm okay with people.
Can we talk about what fraud actually is?
Sure, but like I'm
You can
okay
give it
with
a
people who like
principal elements of
engage in
fraud.
like economic, was it economic bondage, what's it called, I forget the name, but like where like the pay there's a specific name for this, but where
Findom, that's what it's called.
Findom, thank you, financial domination. Thank you so much for that. Financial domination, I'm okay with that. But like, but their services they provide, at least from the financial doms I've seen, right? And I haven't engaged with this. I don't have enough money to engage with this. I can guarantee you. Like those people provide the service that they offer, right? Like oftentimes, like treating their pay pigs like absolute shit, right? So demanding more money, right? Watching them spend the money, like sending them videos, like here's all the things that I bought with your cash, right? Send more now, right? That's what they want. So that's what
I think someone who's
there's
looking for that is
about
one thing, but I think that like the general idea, like the general like crap. What do people talk about? People say the same thing with Twitch, with like the fake engagement. Basically, you seem like people's friends. There's a word for it.
Oh, you mean the I can't remember anything anymore.
There's a phrase for we talk about it all the time. Well,
yeah, the
fake
parasocial engagement.
Parasocial, yeah. I think that to a degree, like parasocial engagement, I think at a certain point it becomes non-consensual. Like I don't believe that people. I think that you can be manipulative with someone's emotions, with someone's.
I think there's a line there too.
Like,
I think that's
okay.
fair.
So
go ahead, Scott.
Give me the definition.
This conversation is, oh my god. So what you're talking about is undue influence, right? Do parasocial relationships create an undue influence? Well, they don't, because the individuals have the ability to not go to Twitch whenever they want. They have the ability to seek out other means of things, right? Whereas like undue influence, where you're talking about like a power imbalance there, is defined by like, let's say a boss and their underling. Right? If this person goes against their boss, for example, they might be fired. So the boss has an undue influence there. Whereas like a parasocial relationship that like a streamer has with like a hot girl that they're in love with is like an issue they need to deal with their therapist, not a legal issue here. Now, when talking about fraud, right? there are 9 principal elements of fraud. I do not think that there is any argument as to whether or not 1 through 3 and 5 through 9 meet the definition of fraud when talking about prosperity gospel, when you're talking about people like, let's say, Joel Osteen or something. The real crux here is part 4. Now, I linked it in chat. This isn't like obviously the only document, but this is a really good write-up on like the 9 principal elements of fraud under common law. And the 4th principal element is representers' knowledge of the representation's falsity or ignorance of the truth, right? So if you really want to say that this is fraud, what you need is some form of evidence that can create a balance of probabilities in court, or at least we can know of, right? That proves that this person knows what they're saying is bullshit.
I think,
and if you have pastors that believe in this, then you can't do that unless you find some recordings, some posts, some conversation they had, or some type of evidence to suggest that they knew at some time that that these people aren't going to get wealthy by donating their money. The other 8 parts of the other 8 principal elements, I think, are very clearly you can say this is fraud, but you need all 9 in order to meet a case for fraud.
This is not, I'm trying to make a case for fraud in court. I never stated that was the point of that.
I'm trying to use objective measurement of it instead of us just like kind of bouncing around this idea of fraud. You're using a term that has definitions with no idea what it means.
Wrong, whatever, right? Like I think it takes advantage. I think it's exploitative.
Well,
if that's the word that the point is it's a terrible thing. It's an absolute terrible thing that is inflicted upon individuals, but it makes sense that such a terrible thing would be inflicted with the attack vector of Christianity. This makes sense, right? Even an American style Christianity, because that's a very specific strain of Christianity.
Even what Fabian posted though says or ignorance in its truth. So someone can be ignorant about it, can decide to be completely negligent and decide that I'm not even going to look up to see if this is true or anything like that. And that it can be proven that way. 4 is not just you have to know that it's false. You can also include ignorance of its truth, or what most people would call is negligence.
This wouldn't be applicable to religion.
But if someone is professing to believe something off of religious faith, you'd have to prove that belief wrong.
The problem that we have here is that we are dealing with faith, right? So there's faith potentially on both sides, not always with the spiritual leaders, but oftentimes with the spiritual leaders, and pretty much always with the congregation, right? So it gets into like this gray area where it's like, well, if they believe that what they're doing is what God wants them to do, even if it's their spiritual leader telling them to do that, how do you draw that line there and say, well, this is coercion, right? Or something that would manipulate someone into, believing that they're doing the right thing by giving money to this person who's going to just use it on themselves, right?
I think fraud is a great metric for that, and if it meets
I don't
think you have to take somebody to court.
The problem is
that's not what it is. It's about using objective definitions.
The problem is that the principles of fraud are kind of based more around something that is a bit more objective in the world, usually dealing with business and such. With religion, you're talking about faith that extracts you from that and pulls you into the subjective, right? Or the
religion doesn't get to be separate from the real world. And if they're stealing money from people and we can prove it, then they are.
But they're not stealing money. And you'll never be able to prove it. And here's the reason why. Because the vast majority of times, I don't know that it never happens, but I feel like I don't ever hear them say things like, oh, you need to go ahead and give so that I can do more for the community. I don't ever hear those kinds of statements in the churches. What I always hear is specifically, you need to give more, and then God will bless you, right? Like in prosperity gospel and any other gospel, because those things are biblically found, right? Like the idea that'll be there. And I don't think that the vast majority, I don't think in almost any of the cases really could you ever prove that these churches are giving.
That's not what I'm saying.
I got you, but I don't think ever that you would ever be able to claim that the parishioners are giving specifically with the idea of this is going towards, or actually, I'm sorry, there's 2 different kinds of giving in churches. You have your tithes and your offerings. Your offerings can be towards things like, oh, okay, here we're going to have this thing for like the missionaries, or this will be for for our
Mhm.
The
Ugandan
building
effort
fund.
or whatever the freak else, right? And those kinds of offerings, then if you find out that those things never existed, then yeah, you could say that you actually defrauded people in those kinds of
Mhm.
situations. But like in 99% of the time, people are giving through their tithes, and then their offerings aren't like directed at a specific aim.
Right, but that's not what I'm talking about in terms of fraud, right? So let's
We don't
just
have to
say,
talk about
let's
fraud.
It doesn't have to talk about fraud. It's like
I wasn't talking
Right.
directly to you, Fabian. I was talking to just the room because they were saying
for
things
sure,
about
for sure. But I want to make one other distinction, which is like, let's say Joel Osteen, for example, was caught on a hype microphone, right? Or
Mhm.
didn't realize that he was being recorded, and he said something like, "Yeah, I know this shit doesn't work. People give up all their fucking money, and it barely ever pans out for people." If you had that recorded, right, then you can prove that he doesn't actually
It's-
believe what he's
Sure,
telling
but
people.
I think that's an
He's saying it
unnecessary
falsely.
standard to hold someone to say if something good or bad.
Yeah,
I don't think we have to go to that
It's
extreme.
called
That's
an
why it's
objective
relevant.
standard.
But that's not what we're doing.
I apologize for calling it fraud. Exploitative. I think it's
No,
an
I-
exploitative practice. All right, so I don't
Oh
want.
my God.
Like
Now
I
you're
don't
just
think
you're
like you're
running
saying, like,
away
oh,
because I'm
here's
trying
all the
to
evidence
use an
we need,
objective
right?
metric
I'm talking
to actually
about, like,
understand
clearly
reality.
These individuals, hold on. I'm talking about these individuals clearly are not getting what they're promised, right? They're paying tens of thousands. You
not
have
about what you believe.
documentaries
Cults are
talking about these
exploitative.
individuals, right? Like talking about people who fall into the prosperity gospel, who empty their bank accounts, empty their life savings, right? Because they think, oh, I'm going to get more. It's like a casino, right? They're treating it like a casino. I think maybe Zonia, made that point previously, like betting with gambling with the divine. That like if I give a little bit more, just like in a slot machine, then I'm going to get a ton out of it, right? That they keep. And nothing ever happens, right? But
it's just obvious at this point that you're mad at religion.
The thing that is guaranteed to happen is that preacher is going to get rich, right? It's an exploitative practice. That's the only thing I meant, right? So I'm sorry, I used the word fraud. I shouldn't use the word fraud. I apologize, right?
You can't
do that
big
crime.
You can't.
Marys,
No,
right?
No, but
and
you
apology.
can't. You're using the most extreme examples, right? To then make a giant tent about everything. I'm
About
trying to
what-
use an
what is
actual
everything?
objective
What is
standard.
everything that I'm talking about? What is everything?
But you
I
don't
think you have
think
an
that
issue
there
with
aren't
Christianity.
churches where people believe in prosperity gospel, but the pastor isn't getting rich? You don't think that's possible? Because you just said the only thing that could possibly
Are there
happen.
prosperity gospel churches where a pastor isn't getting rich? Is that the case?
Of course.
I mean, I can go search for
course.
one. I'm
Probably
sure
the
there has
majority.
to be
Wait,
plenty of
Prime,
poor
Prime.
churches that do
Prime,
that.
don't die on that hill.
I want to find a poor prosperity gospel
I'm
pastor.
asking.
That would be awesome.
I'm not dying on
It-
any hill.
I'm sure that's the majority of them.
It depends on how you define prosperity gospel, then, because I mean, again, the messages that Joel Osteen gives are literally not distinct from like the messages I've heard in virtually every church I've ever been in, and I've been playing the piano for churches for literally more than half of my life, and I've been in God knows how many different denominations and different churches. This is just common theology, right? Again. I don't know that anyone that's not saying those kinds of things.
That's not the same as prosperity. Prosperity gospel is something individual, right? I know what you're talking about in terms of like, yes, give to get, right? Like that there is
right
an element of that, right? And you talked about that yourself, and that like how when you started giving, you felt like you saw the difference happening in your life.
Not felt. We can quantify that, baby.
But sure, but that doesn't. That's not the same as the prosperity gospel that I'm talking about. That people rail against, right? That's not the same thing. That is an aspect that those preachers can use, right? They can use those verses to make their case, right? But like the case is, give me a ton of money, and then it'll eventually somehow trickle down to you. That's what it is. Fucking trickle down economics.
Like the parody show of Righteous Gemstones. I think it's really funny. They're absolutely a prosperity gospel church. And like this isn't a super popular thing anymore, but I feel like everyone here should be old enough to remember into the late 90s, early 2000s. If you watch TV on Sundays or late at night, you would see literally the things come up that says like, have you sinned? You know, have you committed adultery? Like, bring it to God. Pay $5.99 and your sins will be forgiven on TV. Like some really blatant stuff like that.
It's no different than the Catholic Church fucking paying for fucking individuals to get into heaven.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Same thing.
I think that, so. If you're dealing with that, that's what I'm saying. I think that these things, I think they're exploitative, and I think that they're wrong. But I don't think that that speaks to Christianity or religion as a whole, or pastors being rich. My bad.
But in every era, religion helps clearly accomplish whatever goals they want, right? So in terms of what Scott just mentioned, right? During the Crusades, right? Where they I can't remember the names of anything, right? But basically, you could go to the Holy Land, do a bunch of slaughter, and then come back, and then pay to get your sins renounced, right? Because what do you want? What do you know? The kings at the time, the rulers wanted people to go down to the Holy Lands and do a bunch of slaughter, but people were skeptical of that. But the church, don't worry, the church is there to help you out, right? When it comes to slavery in this nation, there were a lot of people who originally were against it, and they used the Bible to say this is clearly wrong, right? But don't worry, once the money came running in, and the elite of this nation thought better of it, or worse of it, excuse me, right? The church was there to help them out and gave plenty of excuses, plenty of verses that would back them up and say this is the righteous path, right? Religion is always there to help.
Like there's bad, there's bad people in there's bad people. I think there's not bad people in religion. It's like there's not this isn't new. Jesus Christ went against the Pharisees for doing what they were doing to the people. This isn't new, but it doesn't mean that religion is bad. In Christian, the Son of God came down and he corrected the Pharisees, which were considered the religious of the religious at the time. They were considered like oh God, I need to listen because someone is talking. The Pharisee is talking, oh God, I need to listen. And Jesus came down and went against them almost entirely. So just to say that someone's using religion the wrong way does not in any way condemn religion in and of itself as a whole.
So first of all, just a little bit of context for the history of the Crusades, since you mentioned it as the state and the church working together to slaughter. Have you ever heard of the Reconquista? Have you ever heard of 400 years of invasion into Europe? Have you ever heard of the fact that a third of all castles in Europe were built to protect from Muslim pirates?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
you know
about.
what I mean? It's not just like this. I mean, there's a lot more nuance to this conversation about the Crusades. After 400 years of invasion, they fought back. But at the same time, yes, there was a lot of the state and church working together, like any institution that is powerful at the time.
I don't deny what the words you're saying, like the history you're talking about.
That was a defensive war after 400 years of invasion.
Exactly happened. So you can make your excuses, but this is exactly how that worked, right? When people were skeptical of
not making excuses. I'm just saying,
great. So then
you're proving your hatred of religion.
Then we're already in agreement about the history, though.
Right. I'm glad that. So we are all in agreement. Then
you can't look at thought objectively. You can't look at anything objectively.
Okay, whatever.
You're just mad at religion.
Whatever.
Okay, it's okay. So I think we're all in agreement.
We're out of time for this particular conversation.